Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sanova and you are watching A News Now. Let's take a look at today's top stories. The U.S. military has carried out a lethal strike on an alleged drug vessel in the Pacific, killing 4 people. EU leaders gather in Brussels for a 2-day summit to tackle Ukraine financing and discuss the bloc's enlargement plans. And in a landmark move, petroleum products are being shipped by rail from Azerbaijan to Armenia for the first time in decades. Good afternoon. The U.S. military has carried out a lethal strike on a vessel in the Eastern Pacific, killing 4 people. The Pentagon said the vessel was operating along a known drug smuggling route. The strike comes amid heightened U.S. pressure on Venezuela, with the Trump administration accusing President Nicolas Maduro's government of links to narcotics trafficking, claims Maduro denies. Well, the U.S. President Donald Trump has taken a firm line on Venezuela, showing no sign of backing down from his decision to block sanctioned oil tankers. The move has unsettled energy markets and helped push global oil prices higher.
The international oil prices surged on Wednesday after US President Donald Trump ordered a blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving Venezuela. The West Texas Intermediate for January delivery increased 1.21% to settle at $55.94 a barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange. Brent crude for February delivery went up 1.29% to settle at $59.68 a barrel on the London ICE Futures Exchange. The move also sparked political reaction inside Venezuela. Supporters of President Nicolas Maduro gathered in Caracas to protest the US oil blockade, accusing Washington of economic aggression. Speaking to reporters, US President Donald Trump defended the decision, saying Washington was seeking to reclaim lost energy interests.
Getting land, oil rights, whatever we had, they took it away because we had a president that maybe wasn't watching, but they're not going to do that. We want it back. They took our oil rights. We had a lot of oil there. As you know, they threw our companies out, and we want it back.
In response, Maduro insisted Venezuela would continue trading its oil and rejected US claims over the country's resources, even as most exports remained on hold.
Trade in and out will continue. Our oil and all our natural wealth that by the Constitution and Bolivar's legacy belongs, our wealth, our land, and our oil, to its only legitimate owner, which for centuries and centuries has been our sovereign people of Venezuela, the absolute owner of the land, subsoil, and all its wealth.
The diplomatic fallout is widening. The United Nations chief has spoken with the Venezuelan president, and Maduro has requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss what it describes as ongoing US aggression.
The U.S. Senate has approved a $901 billion defense bill, sending the legislation to the White House, which will then be signed into law by President Donald Trump. The measure, known as the National Defense Authorization Act for 2026, includes a 4% pay rise for service members and funds new equipment and resources to counter China and Russia. The law is set to strengthen U.S. security commitments in Europe and limit cuts to American troop numbers there. It will provide $800 million for Ukraine over 2 years and allocates further funding to support the defense of the Baltic states. The United States has also approved an $11.1 billion arms sales package for Taiwan, the largest ever for the island, as tensions with China grow. The deal includes 8 items such as rocket systems, anti-tank missiles, and drones. The proposal is now on the U.S. congressional review, where lawmakers can block or change it, but support for Taiwan remains strong in Congress. U.S. officials say the sale will help Taiwan strengthen its defense and modernize its military. China said it strongly opposes the move. European Union leaders are meeting in Brussels for a two-day summit to try to agree on how to lend billions of euros of desperately needed cash to Ukraine. The European Commission proposes using frozen Russian central bank assets that are mostly held in a Belgian clearinghouse to secure a huge loan to Kiev. However, Belgium is concerned the plan is not legally watertight, while other states, including Italy, have expressed concern. The EU has also activated an emergency provision that allows qualified majority voting without requiring unanimous consent, a move opposed by countries including Hungary and Slovakia. Russia's central bank says the plans are illegal. Anita Sharma has more on what we can expect.
Welcome to This Day in Europe as leaders arrive in Brussels to decide how to keep Ukraine financed in the years to come. Three fraught options are on the table with no easy consensus in sight. At the heart of the summit is a proposed reparations loan that would let the Commission borrow against immobilized Russian central bank assets held by Euroclear in Belgium, channeling tens of billions of euros to Kyiv, something that would only require a qualified majority. Kyiv would only repay the loan if Russia paid war reparations for the destruction it caused. The EU would then reimburse Euroclear. Now, for countries opposed to this, including Belgium, Italy, and Bulgaria, a second option entails a joint Eurobond-like borrowing scheme guaranteed by unused headroom in the EU budget. That route spreads risk across the bloc, but requires unanimity, an unlikely outcome. A last resort scenario floated in the European Parliament, a coalition of the willing of Euro-Ukraine hardliners that would go ahead with a bespoke financing arrangement outside the full EU framework if the summit collapses without a deal. Last night, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged the EU to send Russia a clear signal that continuing the war is pointless. Meantime, at yesterday's annual Defense Ministry gathering in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin called European politicians little pigs and warned that Russia would achieve its territorial goals in Ukraine through diplomacy or military force. Putin also reiterated that the use of Russian state assets to fund Ukraine amounts to theft and would be met with retaliation. Let's see what unprecedented option the bloc chooses to secure long-term funding for Ukraine. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Staying on Brazil, and the country's Senate has approved a bill to shorten former President Jair Bolsonaro's 27-year prison sentence. The bill was approved by the lower house last week and will now go to President Lula da Silva, who hasn't said whether he will sign it into law or veto it. The move could lower the former president's prison term to just over 2 years. But not everyone was happy with the result, as many protested against a softer sentence in Copacabana. Last month, Bolsonaro began serving his sentence for plotting a coup against Lula after losing the 2022 election. Though new hate speech laws are set to be announced across Australia following the deadly attack at Sydney's Bondi Beach, which left 15 people dead on Sunday, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says new legislation will make it easier to prosecute those promoting hatred and increase penalties for extremist activity. His government faces growing pressure over rising anti-Semitism. The move follows the country's deadliest mass shooting in almost 30 years.
Firstly, the Attorney-General and Minister for Home Affairs will develop a package of legislative reforms to crack down on those who spread hate, division and radicalisation. The Minister for Home Affairs will also have new powers to cancel or reject visas for those who spread hate and division in this country or would do so if they were allowed to come here.
To the Middle East, where severe storms have caused death and damage across the Gaza Strip. Thousands of displaced families are struggling after their tents were destroyed. Streets have flooded and hospitals say they are facing major disruptions, raising urgent calls for international assistance.
Heavy rain and severe storms have been hitting Gaza this winter. A Palestinian man was killed and several others injured after a residential building partially collapsed on Tuesday. That's according to the International Civil Defense Organization, which provides emergency management in human-made and natural disasters. Thousands of tents used by displaced families have been flooded and destroyed, while operations at the Al-Shifa hospital have been disrupted. Authorities are also warning that thousands of homes partially ruined in previous Israeli strikes are now at risk of collapse. Local officials also highlighted the widespread destruction of infrastructure, flooded streets and overflowing sewage, calling for urgent international assistance, including temporary housing and repair of essential services. Last week, a winter storm in Gaza claimed at least 14 lives. More than 53,000 tents were damaged by floods or destroyed by strong winds, while 13 buildings also collapsed. The International Civil Defense Organization says nearly 250,000 families remain in fragile displacement camps, facing cold and flood risks, while access to humanitarian aid continues to be heavily restricted despite the ceasefire in October. The United Nations and aid groups warn that relief efforts could fail unless Israel lifts obstacles, including a vague and politicized registration process for international aid organizations. Israel says it is complying with the ceasefire agreement.
In other news, Israel has approved what it says is its largest ever natural gas agreement. The country will export up to $35 billion of gas to Egypt from its Leviathan natural gas field, deepening energy ties at a time of regional uncertainty and tight supply. Speaking after approving the deal, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the contract matters for Israel's strategic and security interests.
This deal is with the American company Chevron, which has Israeli partners, and they will supply gas to Egypt. I approved the deal after securing our vital security and other interests, which I will not detail here. This deal greatly strengthens Israel's position as a regional energy power, and it contributes to stability in our region.
Turning to the news of Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Reiner, who were both found dead on Sunday. Their son Nick Reiner was arrested on suspicion of killing his parents and appeared in court on Wednesday morning in Los Angeles. Newly released video footage of his arrest shows him walking into a patrol station in LA on Sunday and then walking across the street as police confronted and arrested the 32-year-old. He has been charged with 2 counts of murder. The family has spoken publicly about Nick's history of battling addiction. Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the high-stakes EU Leaders Summit in Brussels, focusing on Ukraine, European security and enlargement. Stay tuned.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay.
Challenges.
Today in the
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. One important note to fears. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we're reporting the shade of November.
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv, Washington, London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro,
Beijing,
Bangkok,
Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan,
Tehran,
Islamabad,
Istanbul,
Kabul, Port Emu.
Welcome back to A News. EU leaders are meeting in Brussels for a high-stakes summit focused on Ukraine-EU security enlargement and the bloc's future finances. At the heart of the talks is a crucial question: how Europe will raise at least 90 billion euros to support Ukraine in the coming years. To break down the political, financial and strategic implications of this European Council meeting, I'm joined by Felipe Fernandes, a political scientist. Felipe, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me here again.
So in your opinion, why is this summit being described as a make or break moment for the EU?
Well, nowadays, we understand that the EU leaders are debating how to boost European security autonomy, given the Russians' continuum war against Ukraine, and uncertainty over how the US wants to play along with European counterpart in the midterm, in the mid-range, I mean. So nowadays we understand that political leaders in the European Union are being pressured to deliver concrete answers to all these challenges, and that is specifically because the alliance or system of alliances that we usually have and that we are used to when it comes to geopolitical and to international affairs is no longer a guaranteed aspect of any given member state of the European Union. And even within the European Union, we are starting to understand that the divisiveness is more than just circumstantial. It is a fundamental and structural divideness that we have within the EU member states. So all of this really is a make or break moment for European leaders and for European Union as a whole, if it wants to be recognized as a major and pivotal actor when it comes to international affairs. If the EU is not able to give concrete answers that go along with the necessities and the needs and the wishes of EU leaders and EU population, it may be seen as fragile as a secondary actor in the European and in the global aspect, of course.
Mr. Fernandes, how significant is the 90 billion euros target for Ukraine support in 2026 to 27?
Well, it is very significant. Of course, it is a vital moment. Then again, to make sure that the European integration process of Ukraine goes along perfectly within the timing that the European leaders want to. We understand that it may be a goal of the European Union to have the EU enlarged to Ukraine by 2027. We know that other Western Balkan countries are also in the same process. For instance, Montenegro could become a new EU member state by 2028. And so, of course, this is a very important moment for Europeans to go into a Western part of European territory that up until now, it has become very difficult for the EU to go along with the process that with all the requirements that it has for the process to be completed. And so, of course, this is a very important tool to make sure that that Ukrainian policies, Ukrainian governance model goes along in the mid range. To a point that it becomes more Europeanized, let's put it that way. And so we understand that there is a will from the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government. That is a moment that is crucial at this stage for Europe to enlarge its influence to Ukraine. And so, if this is successful, it could be very important to fasten the EU process of Ukraine into becoming a member state in less than 2 years from now on.
Then how realistic is the idea of using frozen Russian central bank assets, and what legal or political risks does that option carry for the EU?
Well, nowadays it's very complicated to comment on that aspect, because we understand that then again the divisiveness that we see within the European leaders pose a very significant political risk of this not being able to go along and to go forward. So we are talking about nowadays, if I'm not mistaken, just over 200 billion frozen Russian assets, with almost 100 billion euros of possible reparation loan for Ukraine's defense and reconstruction. And of course, this poses a massive question that is on even if EU leaders understand and each other and agree with each other on the political aspect of it, then we have the legal aspect of it. When is this going to be decided, and where are we going to understand that it is legitimate to use Russian public state assets or private oligarchs' money in reparations to Ukraine and so on. So it is very complicated at the moment, because politically speaking, it could pose a major blow for quite a few EU member states that nonetheless have a sort of stable and institutional relation with Russia, that for many reasons do not want to lose necessarily that institutional relation, but of course to accept on the political aspect, on the political part of it, to accept more than 200 billion euros of Russian sovereign assets to be used and directly directly allocated to Ukraine could of course have a very significant diplomatic consequence on these relations.
So if EU continues to accept a Plan B, is there enough political unity among the 27 members to agree on joint borrowing again?
Well, it is, again, complicated. We know the majority of the EU member states are aligned with having Ukraine within the EU, regardless of the NATO conversations. But having Ukraine within the EU, having Russian assets being used to reconstruct Ukrainian cities that were unfortunately devastated with all this very consequential war. But then again, it's complicated for the EU to have these sorts of alignments on the mid and long range because of how different countries want to establish themselves within their European counterparts. So we know that when we take into consideration some Western countries like Slovakia or Hungary at the top of our heads, we understand that they want to do something different with the EU. So to challenge the EU when it comes to this. The EU enlargement, the EU neighboring policy, or even the multi-annual financial framework that is nowadays being discussed and very, very significant for any EU policy that the European leaders want to pursue. To be able to counter EU's legitimate needs and guarantees that they have for their future, it is also a way of these countries to establish themselves as an alternative leadership within the EU, not so focused on the major ambitions of the French and German government, for instance, who want to enlarge and to keep prosperity transferring their influence on the other EU member states. But of course, for them to push. For them to push a different alternative within the EU could be very significant, and it could be, from a political aspect, an incentive for them to keep pushing some difficulties for an agreement.
Mr. Fernandes, how does U.S. pressure for a quick Ukraine-Russia deal affect EU decision-making?
Well, that is a great question. That is a great question because, as we understand, the U.S. is still the most pivotal country in global affairs, especially when it comes to the European continent. It is still a privileged partner when it comes to business imports and exports for many of the European member states. So regardless of who takes on the presidency of the US at the moment, of course, we understand that truly no European country wants to lose that connection. But of course, current Trump administration push for a definitive and a quick end to the Ukrainian war, with all the propositions that are supposedly on top of the table and on top of the negotiations, such as land loss for the Ukrainians, are not being very well accepted within the EU heart, because of course when you want to add a member state, you want to understand all the prosperity and all the possibilities and opportunities that country will be able to come with. And so of course, for instance, to be able to accept land loss in Ukraine when you see so many rich valuables in the land and rich valuables in the access to the sea in southern Ukraine, of course this poses a big pressure for European leaders, because then again, from a very pragmatical but strategical aspect and strategy for the European Union, of course you have on one hand the humanitarian and the moral and political discussion of having Ukraine becoming a new member state for everything that matters politically and diplomatically against Russia. But at the same time, you also have the economic aspect of it, and of course the European leaders do not want to just keep enlarging the European Union to a point that you have more countries being direct beneficiaries of the EU budget than the ones who are actually contributing for that possibility and for that overall in common budget as well. So it is very significant, more significant than most people could possibly think, and it could push European leaders, even against their will, to a point of hopefully not no return, but for them to being pushed further away from the U.S. interests that, of course, some of them collide directly to European interests, even if we are talking about European countries.
So if no agreement is reached at this two-day summit, what would be the consequences for EU credibility?
Well, I think that for better or worse, no one is expecting a direct and concrete result from this summit. Unfortunately, it's very difficult in whatever topic you want to cover to have a very successful summit where at the end of the day you have more than just a manifestation of intents or wishes. Of course, it's very complicated to get 27 member states in one single room and having them agreeing not just on a few premises, not just on goals, but the way we need to operationalize the methodology that we need to use in order to reach out those goals. So it is very complicated. Even if the 27 member states agree on where the EU should go, how the EU member states should align with each other, it is not expected for them to agree on a methodology on how to achieve those goals. So of course, EU's credibility at the moment has already taken a few blows in international affairs, because on one hand you have more and more big players who are very fast to make a decision, And on the other hand, the major international and geopolitical ally of the EU is also looking at the EU decision-making process as a fragility. And I'm speaking then again about the United States, of course. So it would be very, very important, of course, for European leaders to show the world that they are able to be very pragmatical. But the deep set of rules within the European Union is not guaranteed of any pragmatic decision-making process. And so we understand that everything takes a lot of time. And if the US is able to take a decision in 1 or 2 months, the EU will probably take up to 1 or 2 years. And so if we have a successful summit for today and tomorrow in Brussels, would be to have EU member states aligned when it comes to the premises that they agreed on, or they discussed on, or they based their conversation on, and what would be the goals to achieve on the short and mid-range. But unfortunately, I do not expect any sort of quite concrete decision from EU member states, and to accept the risk that EU credibility could be on still a spiral role of becoming delegitimized.
Felipe Fernandes, thank you very much for speaking to A News. We appreciate your time and analysis. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Stay tuned.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
They arrived in Karabakh in late August, early September 2022.
All of this. Yes, Ruben Vartanyan.
Just remember what he did in Karabakh.
Ruben Vardanyan onlara sona kadar mübarize ideyasını aşılayırdı.
You are going nowhere. Is that the message?
I will stay with my people here. Whatever we will face it, we will face together, yes.
He is criminal for Europe, for NATO countries, and for Ukraine. That's why we need to arrest him.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. For the first time, petroleum products are being shipped by rail from Azerbaijan to Armenia, a move officials say reflects progress in the peace process between the two neighbors. On December 18th, Azerbaijan began exporting oil products to Armenia. The shipment includes 22 rail tank cars carrying 1,210 tons of AI-95 gasoline, produced by Azerbaijan's state-owned company SOCAR. The delivery follows an agreement reached on November 28th in Gabala, northern Azerbaijan, during talks between deputy prime ministers from both countries. Officials describe the export as an early economic dividend of peace and a step toward rebuilding trade ties. Analysts say the move could boost regional connectivity and lay the groundwork for broader economic cooperation across the South Caucasus. Kazakhstan and Japan are set to deepen economic ties during President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's official visit to Tokyo, where a series of multi-billion-dollar agreements is expected to be signed. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzaeva has the details.
Kazakhstan and Japan are moving to deepen their economic partnership during President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's official visit to Tokyo. A package of commercial agreements totaling more than $3.7 billion is expected to be signed. The package includes over 40 documents covering energy, renewable energy, digitalization, mining and transport. President Tokayev is also scheduled to meet representatives of major Japanese companies, underscoring the business-focused nature of the visit. This is President Tokayev's first official visit to Japan, and it began with a meeting with Emperor Naruhito, setting the political context of the trip. According to experts, Japan views Kazakhstan not only as a market but as a strategic partner in Eurasia. Tokyo is seeking stable access to uranium and other critical minerals. Kazakhstan holds a significant share of the global uranium market and is seen as a key partner as Japan moves to restart its nuclear energy sector. Rare earth metals are also part of this agenda, helping Japan reduce dependence on Chinese suppliers in sensitive industries. Economic ties reflect this trend. Trade turnover reached $1.8 billion last year, while foreign direct investment from Japan exceeded $468 million. The Japan Bank for International Cooperation has also signaled readiness to invest an additional $200 million in energy, infrastructure, food processing, and engineering projects. The visit continues on Friday in an expanded regional format with discussions expected alongside other Central Asian leaders at the Central Asia-Japan Summit. Fariza Kalimurzaeva, Almaty, A News.
Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan has taken major steps to expand regional trade and economic cooperation. Both countries have signed commercial agreements worth $157 million as the countries move to strengthen private sector ties. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis reports from Kabul.
A business connectivity conference between the private sectors of Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan was held in Kabul. The event was organized by the Afghanistan Chamber of Commerce and Investment and brought together senior officials and business leaders from both countries. The Minister of Industry and Commerce of Afghanistan, Nuruddin Azizi, said the main purpose of the conference was to identify investment opportunities, evaluate existing challenges, and take practical steps to strengthen economic cooperation. During the event, Azizi announced the official launch of a Kyrgyz trade house in Kabul, adding that Afghanistan is also planning to open its own trade house in Bishkek in the near future. Meanwhile, Kyrgyzstan's Minister of Economy and Trade highlighted his country's interest in expanding trade with Afghanistan. He said that the newly launched trade house will help establish a direct contact between companies, facilitate transit of goods, and host trade meetings. At the conference, contracts worth $157 million were signed between 10 companies, covering sectors such as cement, fresh fruits and vegetables, pharmaceuticals, transit, telecommunications, and security equipment. The head of the Afghanistan Chamber of Commerce and Investment said the country offers strong investment opportunities and emphasized the Chamber's commitment to long-term and sustainable cooperation between the private sectors of both nations. This visit comes at a time when trade between Kabul and Islamabad has been suspended for more than 2 months, a situation that has opened new avenues for Afghanistan's trade and increased interest from Central Asian countries. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi wrapped up a three-day official visit to Belarus and Russia, during which he held high-level talks and signed cooperation agreements with his Belarusian and Russian counterparts in Minsk and Moscow. Turaj Shiralilo has more.
Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi arrived in capital Tehran from Moscow on Wednesday evening after paying an official three-day visit to Belarus and Russia. In Minsk, he met with his Belarusian counterpart Maxim Ryzhenko, President and Secretary of State National Security Council. At the conclusion of the visit to Belarus, which according to official sources focused on bilateral ties, he told reporters that invitation of Iran's Secretary of National Supreme Security Council was submitted to his Belarusian counterpart. It was also agreed that Minister of Transportation of Belarus will visit Tehran in the near future to discuss international transit cooperation. Foreign ministers of Iran and Belarus signed three documents on strengthening the role of international law in international relations, on strategic principles for countering unilateral coercive actions, and on cooperation of the two foreign ministries for 2026 to 2030. During the second leg of his visit, Araghchi met with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, lawmakers of the State Duma, as well as scholars and thinkers in Moscow. Araghchi and Lavrov signed a cooperation document based on the Iran-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty, specifying the program of consultations between their foreign ministries for the years 2026 to 2028. The Iran-Russia Strategic Treaty, which entered into force in October 2025, is valid for 25 years. In a joint press conference with Russian Foreign Minister, he said that Iran has not sent any message on resumption of nuclear negotiations with the United States. In Tehran, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian also said on Wednesday that he will not accept U.S. conditions for renewed talks as long as Washington is laying down demands which he termed bullying and humiliating. Turaj Shiralilo, Tehran, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the Armenia-Russia Intergovernmental Commission meeting in Yerevan as Moscow and Yerevan review their economic cooperation amid shifting regional dynamics. See you shortly. Welcome back to A News. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overchuk is in Yerevan to take part in a meeting of the Armenia-Russia Intergovernmental Commission meeting as the two sides review the state of the economic cooperation. The talks come at a time of shifting regional dynamics and questions about trade, investment and strategic alignment between Yerevan and Moscow. We are now joined by Dmitry Bridze, expert at the Russian International Affairs Council and political analyst, joining us from Moscow, Russia. Mr. Bridze, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So what are the key objectives of Alexei Overchuk's visit to Yerevan?
Yeah, in my opinion, the visit of Russia's Deputy Prime Minister to Yerevan in the session of the Armenian-Russia Intergovernmental Commission is not only a ceremonial event, it's a working mechanism designed to keep economic relationships stable at a time when we see that the political context is more complex than before between Russia and Armenia. And of course, there were many agreements signed between the two parties, because we know that Armenia needs Russia because of the Russian economy, because of Russian productions and other things that Russia provided to the region. So in this context, we can say that this Intergovernmental Commission and meeting session that happened, it's more into economical and trading fields more than political, because we know that between Russia and Armenia there were many, let's say, issues on the political level in the last weeks and months regarding the position of Armenia in the region, and regarding also the position of Armenia on the relationship with the European Union. So, but of course, these meetings, what we saw in this meetings, we see that the Russia and Armenia is working on different levels because they signed the official protocol and additional documents at the level of the ministers and agencies. And that matters because the Commission is exactly the format where broad political intentions are converted into administrative tasks, sectoral roadmaps, and concrete coordination between institutions between Russia and Armenia.
Mr. Bridge, which sectors are the center of Armenia-Russia economic cooperation today?
It's mainly the sectors of industry, energy, transportation, agriculture, digitalization, healthcare, and also humanitarian areas such as culture, science, education, and tourism, because we know that Armenia it's integrated in the region, as also Russian companies integrated in the region regarding these fields. And of course, now the cooperation between Russia and Armenia is important for both countries, because Russia is trying to work widely with different countries that they are not. They didn't support the Western policies regarding the sanctions, regarding the to cut relationship with Russia. So as we know, Armenia is in a good position and with good relationship with Russia regarding the economical cooperation and regarding the different also levels of cooperation between two countries.
How do sanctions on Russia affect economic ties with Armenia?
It doesn't affect that much because, as we know, Russia and Armenia cooperate on different levels. If you're talking about financial transactions, if you're talking about bank system, it's mainly integrated because there is many agreements that signed between Russian banks and Armenian banks. So, of course, there are many issues because of that SWIFT doesn't work, and there is sanctions implemented on big banks in Russia, agricultural fields and other fields, but mainly because Armenia is integrated in allies that Russia has mainly a strong position there. So Armenia, of course, didn't like the Russian-Armenian trading relationship didn't has any issues regarding the agreements and regarding the cooperation between Russian and Armenian companies.
Mr. Bridge, how does Moscow view Armenia's growing engagement with the EU and the West?
Of course, Russia looking at that as a danger for its interests in the region, because Armenian position is sometimes we saw that Russian official bodies they disagree with the position of Armenia regarding their position to be near to the European Union and to cooperate with the United States of America. But as we understand very good that even though Armenia is trying to cooperate with the Western countries, also they cooperate with Russia, as mainly all the countries that they work with Russia, also like United Arab Emirates or Turkey or other countries that also they cooperate with the United States of America regarding their defense, regarding the new technologies, and regarding the also trading relationship with the United States of America or European Union. So Russia understands that it's very well, but they're looking at that also as a danger, because Armenia is near to the Russian borders as other countries in the region, post-Soviet Union countries. So of course Russia looking at that when the Armenians they trying to establish a relationship with the Western countries as a danger, and any movement of the Western countries in this region also as a danger for the Russian interests.
So for the first time, petroleum products are being shipped by rail from Azerbaijan to Armenia. How significant is this first ever rail shipment of petroleum products in terms of building trust and advancing the broader Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process?
In my opinion, it's very important because, of course, it happened because of Turkey mediators, and of course because of the administration of the President Donald Trump that help to sign agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan to have a long peace agreement and to work and to cooperate together. And of course, it's a sign that the region will change in 5-10 years and will be more cooperation, not as it was before, conflicts and problems. So of course, it's because of diplomats that they work on different levels between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and countries that tried and worked to mediate between between Armenia and Azerbaijan to solve all the conflicts and issues regarding Karabakh and regarding the war that happened before. And because, of course, the main sign of that was the peace agreement that signed in the White House in the United States of America.
And looking ahead, what will define Armenia-Russia relations over the next few years?
I think mainly the Russian-Armenian relationship will be depend on the Russian foreign policies and how the Russian-American relationship will be, because of course the Ukrainian crisis is affecting the Russian foreign policies in the region, and of course the American tensions, and if you can say also the policies of the administration of the United States President Donald Trump, that is trying also to open its diplomatic channels with Russia to solve all the issues and the conflicts that happened in the past during the administration of Joe Biden, the ex-president Joe Biden. But of course now the Russian foreign policies are changing because of the Ukrainian crisis day by day. So predict how it will be in the next 5 years, but mainly if the Ukrainian crisis will be solved and there will be a peace agreement, the Russian foreign policy could change to more, let's say, or to open more diplomatic channels with the Western countries, with the European Union and the United States of America. But it also will depend if the Western countries, and of course the European Union will cancel its policies regarding sanctions and regarding implementing sanctions on Russian big companies and of course on a banking system.
Dmitry Bridge, thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insights. We appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot. You're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.